I'm Lena.
I'm Jada.
And I'm Vanessa.
Welcome to San Diego's HCL Video Project.
One of the things that impacted that situation was the fact that they left behind a lot of their relatives who did not make that transition to the north.
The conditions in my hometown were the same as the conditions in practically every northern town.
Pastor Ham, I am not nonviolent. You know, I had just spent my time in the war zones, and if someone was going to spit on me, I was going to hurt them.
I have some very, and have had all my life, very good friends who are white. I consider them personal good friends, but they're white, and they still have a white privilege that I don't have.
The Great Migration between 1910 and 1940 was a journey where African Americans traveled from the South to the North.
They were in search of a better life, economically, socially, educationally, and culturally. They heard they would work and escape the horrors of the Jim Crow laws.
But when they reached the North, they found that the white Americans in the North treated them just like those in the South.
We were informed that, casually informed that when we got to this picnic grounds, swimming would not be open to us as Negroes that we were called then. And so we decided not to attend. The blacks decided not to attend. But it were incidents like that all along. I mean, not only the name calling, but just the separation, the lack of opportunities that you had.
As far as the migration and the effect that it's had, they found better jobs in the North, and they were able to get away from that plantation mentality that was so prevalent in the South, and that blacks had to get into because that's the only jobs that they could find. Once we got up north, then the jobs started opening up in manufacturing, and businesses and other things, and of course it took years to happen, but it did happen that blacks made progress in the North, as well as those blacks in the South who began to realize that there were better things to do than picking cotton or working on the farm.
Pastor Ham, I am not nonviolent. You know, I had just spent my time in the war zones, and if someone was going to spit on me, I was going to hurt them. My role, I think, was more working underground than it was being above ground, because I was a violent, angry, black young man when I came home from the service. And it was not anything within me that was going to allow me to be a pacifist. You strike at me, I'm going to strike back at you. I have since changed a lot.
In our research, we discovered that there was a second migration between 1940 and 1970, where more than 6 million African Americans moved again, this time setting their focus on the West.
After realizing that the North was not what they hoped it would be, those who were financially able moved out west.
But they were fooled again. It was here they heard stories of racism on the West Coast, stories about the Mississippi of the West.
And I've always defined it as Mississippi West. It created the illusion of fairness that didn't exist and still does not exist. There is the sunshine. I remember the migration during the World War II, where you had a lot of individuals coming from Texas, Oklahoma, and Alabama. And the war industry in this community, with a consolidated aircraft factory and all of those things, is what brought the migration this way. What I have found in San Diego through my history here, those that have been productive usually were those that came from the South to San Diego. And the reason I feel that way is because when I think of my cohort, the people my age all growing up together in this community, a lot in jail, a lot dead, a lot having done nothing of value. And when I look at the people who have done outstanding things in this community, I can migrate from the South directly here and see. And I think that is stemmed on the basis that when you're coming from an environment like the South, where it was very clear that education was extremely important to those that migrated, because when you've been denied something and now you have an opportunity to capture that, there is a strong desire and a sense of needing to do it. And I see that as the difference between those in the South who suffered directly to those in the North who had the illusion of fairness and equity.
Well, I named it the Mississippi of the West because it, in fact, was one of the most segregated cities I have ever been in. Of course, it got me into trouble a lot of times, but eventually it worked out well. We became one of the most popular groups in town ever, still popular, called the Citizens Interracial Committee, CIC for short. We were the official human relations agency for the city. We eventually had 19 staff people. We worked in every area you can think of, from housing to police relations to education and the whole bit. We filed several lawsuits. One big one was to desegregate the city's schools.
Mississippi South is a very good commentary because I equipped myself with the idea of what was occurring in the 60s in the South and the absence of that direct relationship here, but a very indirect. I remember very distinctly in this town where, as a young black man or a black man period in La Jolla after dark, the police were going to stop you. Mississippi West? Yeah. Is it still Mississippi West? Yeah. In a moderated form, but I think that the moderation is based on those that have been able to overcome the obstacles.
During the civil rights movement, there was another movement taking place in California. It was the migrant workers' civil rights movement.
Led by Cesar Chavez, these agricultural workers wanted some of the same rights as African Americans. This includes economic, social, and cultural rights.
The Farm Workers Union, the United Farm Workers that Cesar Chavez was leading, they got involved, and Cesar came down to San Isidro. And I met him there, hi and bye kind of thing, and I just listened to the meeting that was at the leader of the local farm workers' home. I think the important thing about Cesar, was besides him getting most of my generation involved in their communities in the political arena, was that, like I said, we were the forgotten, the silent, the invisible minority. We didn't exist. Cesar was, gave Chicanos here in this country an identification. Nationally and even internationally, people started saying, "Who are these people?" What's their history? What's their issues? What's their problems?
Latinos and African Americans have always had a great relationship.
The Chicano movement, I got involved with the Chicano movement in 1968. And like I said, it was due to all of the other movements, especially the Afro-American movement, that we owe a lot to for raising the issues, raising the consciousness of people and say, hey, we also have a lot of problems. How come we don't have any politicians? How come we don't have any school principals? How come we don't have any counselors? How come our children are not in the colleges?
In 1953, the Urban League of San Diego was formed. Former CEO Cecil Stepp recalls some of the stories.
The Urban League has been strong in this community for all this period of time. It had its ups and downs, like any organization. Nonprofit work is not the easiest thing in the world. But I'm just very pleased with what they've been able to accomplish over time.
Rudolph Johnson recalls the role his father played at the Urban League.
Well, the thoughts that I have about my dad stem back to the early 1980s. I can remember when my father first got hired by the Urban League as their president and CEO. And by the way, he came by way of the Neighborhood House Association to take that job. I was in high school at the time, and I used to go to work with him on occasion and sit on his couch, much like you're sitting on my couch, and literally watch him conduct business from his desk. And that was my first exposure to not only the Urban League, but to the things he was doing in the community, which really inspired me as a community advocate.
The idea of creating a society where everybody has an equal opportunity is still away from us. We have a long way to go to get there. People have a long way to go to learn that, from my point of view, that society for everybody is better if people are included, if everybody's included. And you don't have people outside who don't feel part of, who are willing to tear down or destroy.